On the morning of January 30th, 1889, a valet knocked on a locked bedroom door at a hunting lodge in the Vienna Woods and got no answer. When the door was finally forced open, he found Crown Prince Rudolf of Austria-Hungary and a 17-year-old Baroness named Mary Vetsera, both dead. What followed wasn't really an investigation. It was one of the most carefully managed cover-ups in the history of European royalty, and it worked so well that the official cause of death that ran in the newspapers that same afternoon wasn't even true. To understand why the Habsburgs went to such extreme lengths, you have to understand what Rudolf actually was to that empire. By 1889, Austria-Hungary was a sprawling, fractured patchwork of nationalities held together almost entirely by the sheer will of one man, Emperor Franz Joseph I, who had already ruled for over 4 decades and would go on ruling for decades more. An empire like that needs a stable line of succession, the way a building needs a foundation. Franz Joseph had exactly one son to provide that foundation. Crown Prince Rudolf, born in 1858, was raised from birth to be the future of the empire. But Rudolf was not the heir the court wanted him to be. He was intelligent, restless, and drawn to liberal politics that put him at odds with his own father's deeply conservative court. In 1881, he married Princess Stephanie of Belgium in a match designed purely for political alliance, and the marriage cooled almost immediately. Rudolf drifted further from court life with each passing year, drinking heavily, taking a string of affairs, and by most accounts, sinking into a depression that the people around him noticed but couldn't, or wouldn't, address. In late 1888, the 30-year-old crown prince met 17-year-old Baroness Mary Vetsera at a social gathering in Vienna. She came from a minor aristocratic family with far less status than his own, and within weeks the two were meeting in secret, whispered arrangements at royal residences, letters passed quietly between attendants, gifts exchanged that left a paper trail witnesses would later testify to. Mary, by every surviving account, was infatuated in the way a teenager can be infatuated with someone powerful, dangerous, and clearly unwell. On January 29, 1889, Rudolf traveled to Mayerling, his private hunting lodge, with a small group of attendants. It was meant to look like an ordinary hunting trip. Mary joined him there in secret. Late the following night, a single gunshot was heard inside the lodge. Nobody investigated it at the time. Nobody thought to. The next morning, when the bodies were finally discovered, the machinery of the Habsburg court moved with a speed that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with damage control. Under Catholic doctrine, suicide meant no funeral rites and no burial in consecrated ground, an impossible outcome for the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. So a court physician was quietly pressured into signing a certificate stating that Rudolf had died in a state of mental unbalance, a medically meaningless but ecclesiastically convenient diagnosis that allowed the church to grant him last rites after all. He was buried with full imperial honors in the Kaisergruft, the Habsburg family crypt in Vienna, alongside centuries of his ancestors. Mary Vetsera received nothing close to that consideration. She was, in the court's eyes, an inconvenience to be erased. Her body was dressed, propped upright between 2 of her own uncles, and driven out of Mayerling in a carriage in the middle of the night, so that anyone who saw it would think she was simply asleep. She was buried in a rushed, private ceremony at Heiligenkreuz Abbey under a falsified record, and her own mother wasn't permitted to see the grave for more than 2 months afterward. The official public story, printed in Vienna's newspaper that same day, was that Crown Prince Rudolf had died of a ruptured heart aneurysm. Mary Vetsera wasn't mentioned in that version at all. What the court couldn't fully control was the paper trail Mary left behind. She had written farewell letters in the days before her death, to her mother, to Rudolf, desperate and unmistakably final in tone, and in at least one surviving letter she wrote plainly that she intended to die with him and that she expected to be happier in death than she had ever been in life. Those letters, along with private testimony from servants and attendants who witnessed weeks of Rudolf's visible decline, were seized, suppressed, or quietly destroyed by imperial officials in the days that followed. Some of what survived only surfaced decades later, in fragments, pulled from private family archives, and published piecemeal across the 20th century. The lodge itself became the clearest symbol of the cover-up. Within months, the Habsburgs had the entire building converted into a Carmelite convent, and the room where the deaths occurred was replaced by a chapel altar. It wasn't an act of remembrance. It was a wall, a way to physically seal off the one place where the truth had actually happened, and to make sure no journalist, historian, or curious visitor could ever stand in that room again. The consequences reached far beyond one lodge and 2 graves. Rudolf's death permanently broke the Habsburg line of succession that had run through him, and the throne eventually passed to his uncle's line instead. a shift historians have long argued helped harden Vienna's already conservative political direction in the decades leading up to the First World War. A single night in a hunting lodge didn't just end 2 lives. It quietly rerouted the future of an empire. No formal inquest was ever held. No public inquiry was ever permitted. For over a century, Mayerling functioned exactly as the Habsburgs designed it to. A locked room, a redacted file, a story replaced by a more convenient one. And that, in the end, is what actually makes Mayerling worth remembering. Not a whodunit with no answer, but a documented case of a monarchy choosing control over truth and very nearly succeeding. What finally broke through wasn't a confession or a trial. It was patience, letters surfacing decades late, testimony outliving the people who tried to bury it, until the official version couldn't hold anymore. The Habsburgs buried their heir. They buried the evidence. What they could never fully bury was the truth itself, and in the end, that's exactly what got out.